the SSR XF250X, or the Benelli Pioneer SSR XF250X, or the XF250GY according to the manual. I don't have any off-road experience, so I decided to get into dual sports at the wrong time. Many bikes have returned back to normal, but the Honda CRFs I wanted is sold out, and the used cost as much as new. But I found another bike at a dealership that I didn't even notice was road legal until I just started looking at off-road bikes randomly. Getting this bike was an experiment for me. I wanted to try going off-road, but I did not want to spend a lot in case it was not for me. I wanted to free myself from the concrete jail. I don't really know how reliable this bike is long term, and I know resale value will be lost since it's a cheap Chinese import. But I was curious to see how good it was, and with it only being $100 more than a Grom for something with double the power, it made me interested. It's called an XF250X, but the manual is labeled as an XF250GY. I believe the XS250GY is the base bike and is what it's called coming from China before SSR gets a hold of it. This might be a well-known bike and a good one, but it's hard to find out more info on it. I'm trying to make this video to share what my first 1,000 miles were like. The manual was translated with correct spelling and grammar, but really bizarre wording and phrasing. I will share some of the examples. The manual for this bike seems to be really generic. Some of the items they talk about don't really apply to this bike. The manual felt like it was included just because it had to be there and not for usefulness. Most of the info I have on this bike is from the SSR website on this bike. The website is okay, but it does not even have an SSL or TSL connection, which is odd for a modern website. It's got one cylinder air-cooled and it's a 4-stroke. It has overhead valves, but I don't know how many. I think it's a clone of the Suzuki 250 engine. It's decently smooth at the lower to mid-range RPM. It does vibrate in the upper rev range, but that's expected for a thumper. I will say under 50 to 55 miles per hour, it's good. The website claims it has 18 horsepower at 7k RPM. My butt dyno kind of agrees, and I have noticed that the more oomph as the engine breaks in. The bike overall is not fast, but it goes faster than I have skills for when off-road. It has 5 speeds, and I think that's enough. The bike is not a highway bike. 70 miles per hour is pretty much the top speed. The first and second gear feel really short, which I'm sure is for getting over things when off-road. The gear shift seems positive and better than some other name brand bikes I have tried around the same price point. But it's not without fault. I've been having one issue with shifting from neutral to first when idling. It seems like I have to let the clutch out in first and neutral, then try and shift to get it to go down a gear. This can make red lights a pain if you shift into neutral at them, though maybe there's some tech you can do to make it easier and more reliable to downshift. I also find with the gearbox that the shifting from first to second seems to land in neutral a lot. I'm not sure if it's me or the bike. It could also be that the gearbox is still breaking in. It has front and rear disc brakes. I was kind of surprised about the rear brake, but I guess when it comes to off-road, the rear needs to be good. The brake lines look steel braided, but I don't know if that's real or just for looks. The brakes do work well when I have used them, so that's a dandy. The tires are 18-inch front and 17-inch in the rear. The ones that come with the bike don't seem great, but at least they improved greatly once they were broken in. They are knobby and you can feel it, but on pavement they seem to break loose easily. They seem okay off-road at slow speeds, but I don't think they will stand up if you have any skill. It's carbureted, which means the startup is sometimes picky. It's also tuned weird where it rev hangs when you let off the gas. I'm sure if you know what you're doing mechanically, you can make it stop doing that. The mic have a carb, but it's still electric start only with no kickstart. Just felt like pointing it out because sometimes these do come with kickstart. The bike has a steel frame that makes its weight come out to about 330 pounds, which is kind of heavy side for a 250cc dirt bike, but on par with a 250 street bike. I think it's okay considering its price. On the Webernets it says the seat height is 35 inches. That's on the taller side, but most off-road bikes are tall. I will say for me it's near my limit, though I'm not tall. I'm going to run through these specs about the shocks next. I think they are important to know for an off-road bike, but I don't know how important they really are since I'm new to this no driving on the roads thing. The ground clearance is 8 inches, the front shock is 41mm adjustable fork with an 8 inches of travel. The rear is a standard coil spring, the whole setup seems fine to me and I have not had problems. The gas tank is 2.6 gallons and the bike gets around 67 mpg. I would say the range is about 150 miles, which I find normal on these smaller bikes. The fuel switch on these bikes have an on, off, and reserve. I will say this brings up another point with the bike, which is the fuel gauge. The fuel gauge is a mixed thing on this bike. It's kind of amazing that it has one at all, but it does not work well. It's hard to read if there's any sun on it. Mine seems to be wrong also. When it says half tank, that means it's starting to run out of gas. It's hard to know what the gas octane this bike officially takes. It claims different things depending on which manual you're looking at. The one online and the one they ship with the bike are different. The book and online make claims somewhere in the 90s, but my best guess is that it's using outside the US figures, which often use a bigger number, meaning that in US terms 87 is probably fine. It also has the compression ratio of 9.4 to 1, so I can't see why it would need much more than that. Something else to point out that is strange on this bike is that it has no trip meter, which I think is the first bike I have owned without one. The odometer is marked in kilometers, and when checking with GPS seems true. The speedo is in miles per hour and does seem to be within 1 to 2 miles per hour of my GPS. If you get this bike new, it says it has a 12-month, 12,000 mile warranty, which is not too different from most bikes. The seating is not as bad as I thought it would be. I don't know if it will stand up to the elements, but it was better than a 2x4. But considering it's for off-road and you don't sit much for off-road, it does its job. I will say, considering its fuel range, the seat, even when sitting, is good enough between fill-ups. The foot peg shifter and brake controls are good and better than expected. The foot pegs are metal with spikes and do a great job gripping your feet. They seem a little on the small side. I also find that the rear brake is too close to the engine and it gets really hot on my shin area. Storage is not bad. To start, it has a little tube attached under the rear of the seat. I fill mine with tools. But the thing I like most is the rear rack. I've been using it a lot for carrying stuff from the store and it works really well. I wish all bikes had these. The headlights seem adequate and I can see well enough for how far the bike goes. At night I use my brights if I'm moving anywhere over 30 miles per hour. The sound of the bike is meh and a little weird. It's weird in that it does not sound quite like a normal dirt bike. I think it's something about the can makes it sound just a little off than a normal thumper. I'm sure that's not a hard fix with something aftermarket. Maintenance on the bike has been light, which is good since it's a new bike. The last cheap thing I got started dying in less than 1,000 miles. I've had problems, but nothing out of the normal for a new carbureted bike. I did notice that sometimes the bike is hard to start and playing with the key or kill switch helps fix that. That would be my biggest problem I've had so far. I did get the bike serviced at the dealer at 1,000 kilometers, about 600 miles, like the manual asked. That was an interesting experience. They were new to the bike and told me that I was the first to do so at their shop. They charged me about $150 and told me that they did not have an oil filter for it. I did end up testing a TU-250 oil filter and it worked. The switchgear on the bike does feel cheap and flimsy. It's kind of the most cheap feeling thing on the bike and I don't know how long it will last. The turn signal is vague and mushy. The kill switch feels flimsy. They left the switch that turns on and off the lights, but they blocked off the ability to turn off the headlights. That's fine, but a little weird because they still let you turn off the tail light and the dash lights, even though most bikes keep all lights on all the time. It does have a push to pass switch, which flashes your brights, which I like. The clutch lever is really flimsy. It feels like one of those cheap Amazon replacements. The mirrors on the bike are big and you can see pretty well with them. They do vibrate a decent amount, but that's expected with a single-cylinder bike. To win, I'm not sure if I recommend this bike. It does have a low upfront price, and it has been working for me, but I don't know if it's worth it over a name brand bike with better resale value and an aftermarket. If you're getting it used for cheap and are mechanically inclined, or just want something at the dealer for cheap and a warranty, then I guess it's okay.